What's the most evil prank you have pulled off? Story 1. Mom can't tolerate sweet things. Since she can remember, she never ate sweet. When I was 6 or so during breakfast, Mom left her newly brewed coffee on the table. My older brother encouraged me to put more sugar as a prank. So I did. Mom came back stirred and then drank and spit out a rocket. We started laughing, saying it was a prank, explaining that we put extra sugar in it. She looked at us as if we were stupid. Apparently, I put salt instead. Her coffee was at sea salt level. Story 2. My coworkers in the Chicago office asked me to bring back a phone book and the hotel stationery for my business trip to Kansas City. They were preparing for another coworker's bachelor party the night before the wedding. The groom was known for drinking to an extent that was considered legendary. After a night of drinking, he woke up on the morning of his wedding in a hotel room. He checked the nightstand and found the Kansas City phone book. The desk was stocked with KC stationery. His friends had clued the front desk staff in on what was happening and convinced them to answer his room phone. Good morning and welcome to the Kansas City Holiday Inn. It was 5 hours till the wedding, and he was actually only a couple miles from the venue, but the freak out was epic. Story 3. I have an extra mouse in my desk drawer at work. I have the USB plugged into the docking station of the obnoxious guy a couple cubes away. On days he is particularly obnoxious, I will take out the extra mouse and move it around every few minutes. He has never realized because it's plugged into the docking station and not his laptop. He has even had the laptop replaced. Never noticed. It brings me to tears, silently laughing sometimes. I have to be careful not to overdo it. Story 4, I've posted this before, but I made a friend believe she was being followed by a garden gnome for years. Many of her friends are involved, plus other helpers. She showed up at a B&B in Scotland that we'd recommended, and there was a gnome in the garden, and it looked exactly like the gnome that had briefly turned up in her yard. Then she saw it on her way to work. Then in Provence and Germany. It really did look like the same gnome. It was. Story 5. I used to work for a cruise line. A passenger asked if the crew lives on the ship full time. My coworker explained that no, the crew leaves every night to fly back to Miami and then returns each morning. She walked away satisfied. After that cruise was over, our manager was sharing the passenger evaluations with us and was confused about one in particular. It was a woman who had stayed on deck 14 and had complained that she couldn't sleep at night because of the noise of the crew helicopter. Fact 1. 1,200 crew do not leave every night, but do live on the ship. Fact 2. That ship didn't even have a helipad. Question. What was she hearing every night? Story 6. People in school used to always take my Gatorade. So I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person spit salt water in the middle of class, only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. I had a similar case at work. These two dudes thought they were cool and would take whatever food they wanted from the break room fridge. So I baked some laxative brownies and let them sort themselves out. Management tried to blame me for them getting sick, but I explained how I've been constipated for a while, and that those were my brownies and I never gave them permission to eat them. Obviously, they stopped taking people's lunches. Story 7. Over a decade ago, I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping, and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in, even though it was not a public dumpster. One day, we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair or box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Story 8. I worked at a fast food place where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. On super hot summer days, we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other. Mine were always tame until one day. He left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a vinegar packet, cut open a corner, and put a straw directly into it and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in the front of the store and I heard him spit and scream my name while calling me a cow. He still high-fived me. Story 9, I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it. So the next day, when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. Story 10. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess. For a whole weekend. Saturday went well, and I was happy with how I went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later, I got a phone call from him saying, "Manager and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears, hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mum, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. Story 11. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number, was being a real creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji, and placed an ad offering an 80-inch 3D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it. Until the next day. At work, I got a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses, even though I had told them not to email, but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. Story 12. Working in a hot factory, supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 degrees in there, while we sweat our butt off in 95 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit heat, kind of hot and pissy, and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say, "I'm just cooling off," and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those in there in one shift. He never did catch on. I was doing it, and the planner was pissed, swatting around. There were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice, thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. Story 13. In high school, there was a girl that was acting foolish and laying on top of a table that me and some friends were sitting at. This was one of those plastic folding tables. And we were in JROTC class in the rifle range having some end of the year free time. I then took it upon myself to fulfill a lifelong dream and tie her shoelaces together. The results were better than I could have ever imagined. My JROTC instructor entered the room and told this girl to get off the table, and that's when it all came together. She hoisted herself off the table with full confidence that her legs would work as they always do. Her uneven weighing of the table caused her and the table to flip over, while me and the guys were just sitting there. At first, I was the only one who knew of the shoelaces and was dying of laughter. My friends noticed and started laughing, and the instructor laughed some, and then told her to do push-ups for causing a commotion. After typing this out, I realize it looks bad, but I assure you it was all in good fun. It was not mean-spirited, but it was evil. Spirited. Story 14. I was in Kuwait on the way to Iraq when our bird got delayed for 3 weeks. Well, Kuwait has these things called dub-dubs. A dub-dub is a lizard about the size of a small cat. They're utterly harmless, but when they get pissed off, they hiss loud as hell and do this whole threat display thing. Looks scary as crap. Well, being the enterprising Marine that I was, I quickly set about catching them and placing them in any of the Air Force guys' stuff I could find unattended. Backpacks, lockers, desks, toolboxes, glove compartments, sleeping bags. You name it. I must have planted at least 3 or 4 dozen dub-dubs in my boredom. Some guy would go into his office, you'd hear a drawer open. Houses. Oh, god damn it, I hate these so goddamn much. I was suspected as the dub-dub terrorist, but it was immediately dismissed by the Air Force guys because he's a Marine, he's too stupid. Yes, I am. Suspect nothing and enjoy the new pet I left waiting for you in your pillowcase. Story 15. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy. So naturally, we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls, with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night and I knew my coworker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up, I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room, with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together, watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually, and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening. So when she reached down to turn on the lights, she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say, she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts, LMAO. Still proud of that one, honestly. Story 16. Not sure if this will be seen, but my best New Year was that of 1999. I was 9 years old at the time, and I worked together with my dad to pull off the greatest prank in history. A few minutes before midnight, I synced up a wristwatch with the countdown on TV. My dad pointed me in the direction of the breaker, which was in our garage, and showed me the lever to pull, which would cut all power to the house. Now, I don't know if you remember the hype, but the year 2000 was supposed to destroy all of our computers and technology, sending us back to the Stone Ages. So the moment grew closer as I watched the seconds tick by on my wristwatch. It soon became apparent that I wouldn't need it as I could hear all my relatives inside counting down 10, 9, 8, 2, 1 exclamation mark. I pulled the lever at the perfect timing and everything went black. The first thing I heard was from my aunt. Oh my God, it hit the year 2000 hit. I was only going to leave the power out for 10 seconds or so, but the lever was stuck and I couldn't get it back up for about 2 minutes, during which the whole time I heard my family freaking out. Then eventually they looked outside and started to wonder why our neighbors still had power. Thinking back, I really wish we would have recorded this. Probably could have won $10,000. Story 17. When my brother and I were in middle school, my brother liked to skateboard with our next door neighbor. One day, my brother and the neighbor took the sheet of plywood from under my brother's upper bunk bed. No one slept in the upper bunk. Out of the house and started making a skateboard ramp out of it in the neighbor's adjacent yard. My parents had explicitly told him that he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, in my defense, my brother teased me unmercifully, to the point of tears, on multiple occasions. So keep in mind that he had had it coming for a long time. Anyway, an evil little plan hatched in my brain. I ran to the upstairs window and yelled down at them. Brother's name, guess what? Mom knows everything and she is so mad. Then I slammed the window shut and ran to the stairs and waited while watching my mom read the newspaper. A few moments later, my brother walks in the front door looking worried and says, Mom, I'm so sorry. My mom, who had no idea what was going on, said, About what? While slowly putting the newspaper down. For making a skateboard ramp out of the wood from the bunk bed. You did what? At that moment, a wave of shock and realization swept across my brother's face, and our eyes met. I let out the biggest, evilest little sister cackle and ran into my room. We are adults now and still laugh about it from time to time. Story 18. I convinced a coworker for 2 months that the guy she had sat next to for 3 years was named Jay, not Dave. They worked in different departments, but sat 3 feet away from each other for years. I got the guy in on it, and his manager. Then later his supervisor, group manager, division manager, and entire department. They bought him new nameplates for his desk, changed stuff in the system so his name would print as J, etc. The only thing they didn't change was his phone number and email. She thought she was going crazy, and when I finally told her, she sucker punched me in the stomach and dropped me to my knees. She was a personal trainer in her off hours, so she got me good. Totally worth it, and I laugh about it to this day over a decade later. Story 19. My freshman year of high school. The big craze at my school was this 50-pack of Crayola markers. I don't know why exactly, but fads are fads. A friend of mine had a pack that she was obsessed with. She had them organized in the pack in like a perfect color gradient order. So, of course, anytime she left the room, I'd mix her markers up so she had to fix them when she came back. This went on for a month maybe, and one day in study hall she leaves, and before she leaves turns to me and she says, "Don't rearrange my markers." So I didn't. I rearranged the caps. You see, these markers were solid white, apart from the caps, and a little tiny nib at the other end. She got about halfway through fixing them when she noticed she was holding a marker with an orange cap and a turquoise nib. I can't tell you the joy I experienced when she looked at me and said, "You didn't even move the markers, did you?" I laughed so hard I was asked to leave the study hall. She didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. 100% worth it. Story 20. My brother lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast. One night we discovered that there was about a 5-minute delay for a live show. I saw it on broadcast TV about 4 minutes before he saw it on Dish Satellite. During the Oscars, I called him and screamed at him to turn the Oscars show on. He asked why, and I screamed at him again to just turn the show on. He said he was already watching it, and I told him to keep watching it because somebody blew up the Oscars. I then started narrating what was on the screen and pretending like I was talking to a family member who was in the room with me. I've never seen so much blood. Whose arm do you think that Harrison Ford is holding? Oh, that's Brad Pitt, without his arm. It's got to be his. So much blood. My brother asked me what happened when it all started, and I described the light and sound of a bomb going off. I could hear my brother excitedly telling his wife what they would be seeing. He asked me when it happened, and I told him the last thing that was on the screen was a particular part of a song and dance number. On his TV, that moment came and went, and he sounded surprised and disappointed and said that nothing happened. Yeah, I made it all up. Love you, bro. Story 21. My high school had an open campus for lunch, and there was one very popular way to get from the parking lot to the rest of the campus that went between the sports complex and one of the classroom buildings. Coming back from a restaurant, I needed to piss really bad, and my friend that was driving wouldn't stop, so I emptied my cup and pissed in it. Was it gross? Yeah, but I didn't get it all over myself or his car. So it was a wash. When we got back to school, there was still about 10 minutes before the bell, so the rush of students was about to begin. I didn't throw the cup away. I sat it on the sidewalk and waited from a distance. Most everyone who saw it avoided it, but one poor soul saw it and got his buddies to slow down to create a little bit of room so that he could run and punt it in a cup. He kicked it like it was going to be the game-winning field goal of homecoming. The cup exploded. It went all over his pants. It went all around the area. It was a mess. One of my friends said he shared a class with the guy during the last half of the day, and everyone else in the class kept murmuring about how this dude pissed himself during lunch and didn't clean up after himself. Story 22. Not so much evil, but one of my best pranks that was the most work for such a little reaction was a lifeguard through high school. One of my coworkers ordered Chinese food, but it was her shift when her food came. I immediately got hold of her fortune cookie, carefully pulled out the fortune, printed off a replica with the exact size and logo on it, and even had the numbers on the back. Carefully put the fortune in the cookie. Then I got a plate for her, put the food on it, like the nice guy that I am, and made it look presentable. There was a priceless look on her face as she read, "Lifeguarding is not for you." Story 23. Many years ago, I had a boss who spent most of the day on the phone, chatting to friends and avoiding work. The rest of us in the department worked very hard, but he didn't really appreciate us. I ended up having zero respect for him. On his birthday, he received a memo from the big boss, who worked in another town. It said that from now on, phone calls were limited to 1 hour per day, incoming and outgoing. Any calls exceeding that time limit would be personally charged to them. I made the memo look very official. I used their letterhead, time-stamped it, etc. But down at the bottom, I put a note that basically said, "Haha, just kidding." He didn't make it to the bottom. He called HQ immediately and started complaining about today's memo. To his surprise, they hadn't received it yet. I heard him talking and went in and said, "Pete, you do know that was a fake memo, don't you?" He said, "What?" "I'm a boomer. You can't do stuff like that." He was the laughingstock of the company that day. Story 24. My ex called me in a panic one day, begging me to come over. Wouldn't explain what was up, just that I had to come over. We'd split up several years before after the birth of our son and lived in the same complex. Turns out that a can fell out of the cabinet, and she was convinced that her apartment is haunted. I almost told her she was a fool, but then thought better of it. Told her I thought she was right, and she should stay the night and perform a sage smudging in the morning. After she left, I came back with the spare key she had given me and stacked all the canned goods in the middle of the kitchen. She called me the following day, freaking out. Over the course of the next following months, every time I came over and she wasn't home, I'd let myself in and move something around, switching pictures on the walls, moving furniture, you name it. She never once asked me or mentioned suspecting a prank. Nope. It's a full-on poltergeist. The culmination of my efforts came in the form of writing "Get Out" on the bathroom mirror in shaving cream and carefully dabbing it off. The effect being that when the bathroom got all steamy, the message appeared like magic.